We proudly introduce to you our bulletin board product. This functional and decorative wall covering has many uses and will provide you with many years of great service. This video is to explain in some detail how to install bulletin board, but first we would like to explain to you a little about how the product is made. Bulletin board comes from all natural ingredients such as rosin, wood flour, organic pigment, linseed oil, limestone, cork flour, and jute. These ingredients require a relatively small amount of energy for extraction and are manufactured from almost inexhaustible raw materials. It can be accurately stated that as long as the sun shines and rain falls, nature will continue to supply the raw materials needed. So let's get started and find out more about what you need to know for installing bulletin board. It is important that the product is installed carefully and precisely using one of the two following methods. First is the direct-scribe method, which works directly on the product using a divider tool along with a hook knife and utility knife. When using this method, it's best to finish it off using a crown molding and base. The second is the pattern-scribe method. Using a pre-marked template you create with black roofer felt or pattern felt. Pattern scribing is recommended when the material has to fit the exact size without the use of a molding or base. Throughout the video, we will make a point to emphasize important details that are critical to the success of your installation by flashing this symbol at the bottom of the screen along with a line of text emphasizing the topic. The tools needed for the installation will be demonstrated as we go, but here's a quick overview of what you'll need. Tape measure, utility knife, hook knife, metal straight edge, seam cutter, divider tool, injector trowel, wall roller, and seam roller. Always use the Forbo recommended adhesive. Other adhesives are not covered by warranty. You'll also want to have enough clean space to roll out the material required for installation, for measuring, and cutting. If you're installing more than one roll of bulletin board, be sure the numbers from each roll are the same lot. Otherwise, the color may not match exactly from one batch to the next. As you're inspecting the bulletin board material, this is known as drying room yellowing, which is a naturally occurring part of the curing process of the linseed oil. This drying room yellowing dissipates very quickly with exposure to natural light and reasonably quickly with exposure to artificial light. As you unpack and unroll your material, be sure to pay close attention to any imperfections or damage that may have occurred during shipping. If you have any questions regarding the condition of your material, please contact the place of purchase before proceeding with the installation. When cutting your first piece, you'll want to make a rough cut about 2 to 3 inches longer than needed. This will give you the extra material necessary to cut an exact fit to your wall. Massage out the end curl. Working out the end curl eliminates any puffing which would prevent the bulletin board material from firmly gripping the wall. The cutting technique. Once you've taken measurements, you'll need to be extra careful to perform the cuts with exact precision to ensure proper fit. First, score the material using the utility knife to trace the exact cut. Next, use a hook blade holding the knife at an angle to slightly undercut the edge. Cut completely through. The hook blade must precisely follow the score line made with the utility knife. Always align arrows on the back of the material. In order to maintain consistent texture and grain in your material, there are arrows printed on the back of the product every 2 feet. Be sure to inspect and install each sheet of bulletin board in the same direction using these arrows. One good point of reference is to use the arrows always pointing to the top or ceiling of your installation. Another way to ensure direction is to mark each cut end with an X and always line up the X's at the top. Do not reverse lay. Keep material clean. Be sure to brush off the jute or burlap side, also known as the adhesive side of the material. This must be done in order to ensure the adhesive sticks to the wall and not to any dirt. Always cut off the factory edge. In order to allow for any damage along the edges in transit or handling, we've produced the product wider than the standard 48 inches. To do this precisely, use a seam and strip cutter. To allow for a secure hold on the floor, here's where we're using a double-sided tape. This tape gives us the firm grip we need to hold two pieces together while we cut the seam. This is much easier to perform on the floor than on the wall after the piece is installed, and the results are much better. Overlap the seams by at least a ½ inch and measure 2 points to make sure the sheets are even before you cut. Once this has been completed, using the seam and strip cutter, begin to cut your seam. The strip cutter will slightly bevel the edge of the cut to allow the bulletin board material to expand slightly to create a tight, firm seam. As you're doing this, the bottom edge of the strip cutter is riding the bottom sheet edge, trace cutting the top sheet edge, ensuring a perfect butt seam. Okay, looking good. We're almost ready for the wall, but wait, don't move those pieces. We need to create reference marks for aligning the two sheets in order to ensure a perfect fit when we place them on the wall. To accomplish this, we'll use 2-inch wide masking tape and stretch it across the seams, leaving about 2 to 3 inches on both sides. Next, we'll cut the tape along the seam. When we get to the wall hanging stage, we'll use these to align each sheet as it was originally trace cut. When done correctly, the results will be an almost invisible butt seam. We'll cover this again at a later stage. Now, leave the pieces there and let's go to the wall. Just as important as accurate cutting on the material is thorough row preparation of the wall. Remove all dust and dirt from the walls. Wiping down the wall is critical to a strong adhesive bond. Any dust or dirt on the wall can cause the adhesive to fail. Thoroughly wipe the entire surface with a damp rag. However, be sure the surface is dried before you apply the adhesive. Depending on the type of wall you're applying bulletin board to, will determine the way you prepare it. For painted surfaces, you must first sand the wall, creating a slight tooth for the adhesive to bond to. Using a fine grip sandpaper for this is sufficient. For bare sheetrock, you prepare it as you would to be painted. Be sure the wall is smooth and even and free of any bumps or dents. Porous surfaces must be primed before applying the adhesive. This will allow the adhesive to set properly and not be absorbed into the surface. Remove any existing wall covering and sand off any adhesive residue. If you're unsure that the bulletin board will bond correctly to the wall, try a small bond test in an inconspicuous area. Use a plumb line to hang the first sheet. The alignment of the following sheets will be based on the vertical alignment of the first sheet. Therefore, using a plumb line to ensure exact vertical installation of your first sheet is critical to the entire installation of the bulletin board material. In order to accommodate any irregularities in the starting point of the first wall, measure in approximately 47 inches from the starting point as the point to draw your plumb line. For this installation, we will use it as our seam line. You'll need to snap a chalk line along your plumb mark. Initially, we'll use this line to line up our material. Eventually, we'll use it as an adhesive line as well. Next, we have the material in place. We'll draw a second line using the edge as our guide. We're not quite ready to spread the adhesive, but when we do, you'll want to spread the adhesive in between and top to bottom, but do not go over either adhesive line. In order to maintain even panels on the walls, when laying out the job, avoid using end pieces that are less than half the width of the roll. In order to cut the sheet to fit any irregularities in the ceiling, we're using the divider tool to perform the direct-scribe, which uses the divider tool to follow along the ceiling, tracing any hills or valleys in the ceiling, while at the same time creating a scribe mark into the bulletin board material. To do this, we must first set a reference mark to measure the distance we drop the piece down. Push the material up to the ceiling so it curls a little at the top. Now, using a piece of masking tape, stick half of it on the wall and the other half on the material. Cut the tape with your knife and slide the material down from the ceiling about 1/2 inch, eliminating the curl. Using the divider tool, measure the distance between the two pieces of tape. Take the set distance and scribe along the ceiling while marking the material. Once you've scribed the material, chalk can be used to highlight the scribe mark, thus making it easier to follow with your utility knife. Once we've completed the ceiling cut, we're ready for the adhesive. Always use the Forbo recommended adhesive. Material must be installed into wet adhesive. Be sure to spread adhesive one area at a time and do not try to install more than one sheet at a time. If your adhesive sets up before you get to hang your piece, it can be scraped off. Do not use mineral spirits to remove dried adhesive from the wall. Any wet adhesive spots on the surface should be cleaned off immediately using only soap and water. Dried adhesive can be removed using mineral spirits. Do not use harsh cleansers. Using the injector trowel that comes fastened to the lid of your adhesive, insert it into the slot on the face of your trowel. The blade is a 1/16 inch by 1/16 inch by 1/16 inch squared notch trowel. Spread the glue thoroughly from side to side and top to bottom. The adhesive needs to tack up before applying the material. Once the adhesive is spread, the amount of time needed for proper setting will vary depending on your surface. To check the adhesive, use your finger and drag it across 1 inch or 2 to make sure the adhesive ridges bend and some transfer to your finger. Again, it's important that the adhesive does not get too dry. Remember, it's better to go on too wet than to go on too dry. If by mistake your adhesive gets too dry to install the bulletin board, it will be necessary to remove the dried adhesive and apply a fresh adhesive. Dried adhesive can be removed by dry scraping or dampening the adhesive with water, then scraping. Don't use mineral spirits on the wall. Before setting the material in place, be sure to position it as close to its final resting place as possible. For the best results, avoid repositioning. In order to thoroughly glue the bulletin board to the surface, it's important to roll the material using a wall roller. Don't go lightly on this step. Put your weight into it. When working out the bubbles, going side to side is most effective because it's the shortest distance to remove the bubbles. However, you'll still want to cover the entire wall with the wall roller. First, side to side, then top to bottom. Cleaning the excess adhesive from the wall at the seam edge is critical to avoiding any adhesive buildup, which will result in an uneven surface, also known as ledging in your seam. Use a rag dampened with slightly soapy water or just a putty knife to thoroughly remove any excess adhesive from the edge. Cleaning the final exposed edge isn't as important, as generally you'll want to finish it off using wood or plastic trim. For the second piece, we're going to demonstrate the pattern-scribe method. Using roofer's felt or pattern felt, rough cut a piece to fit within about 1 inch of the installation area. Next, cut a couple of triangles to open up a space to tape the felt into place. Once you've positioned the felt, use your straight edge to make an alignment mark on the felt using the reference marks from the first piece on the wall. For the next step, we will need the straight edge and the divider tool. Using the divider, measure the exact width of your straight edge. Then, use the divider to outline the entire perimeter of the installation area. You'll also want to outline any obstacles, such as electrical outlets or light switches. Once completed, remove the felt, which is now going to be used as your template to cut the next piece. Position the template on your next piece of material. Line up the reference marks on the template with the tape reference marks on your sheet. Then, use the previously cut triangles to tape the template into position. Using the straight edge used to set the measurements on the divider tool, you're going to trace the scribe set by tracing the installation area. Align the inside edge of the straight edge with the lines scribed on the template. Then scribe the outside edge on the bulletin board material and continue following the template around the entire piece. Be sure to remember any of the other obstacles also traced, such as plug points, switch boxes, etc. Once you have the entire piece scribed out using your utility knife, retrace the scribe with the hook knife to make your final cut. Once the adhesive is spread and set, you're ready to install the piece. Hold the second piece up and align the reference marks as tightly as possible. When done correctly, the two pieces should line up perfectly at the reference marks, and the seam will virtually disappear. Repeat the wall roller procedure on each piece. Along the seams, use a seam roller. This will force the glue into the backing and evenly spread the adhesive, giving proper transfer of the adhesive. Your installation may include an inside or outside corner. For inside corners, you'll want to use a method called undercutting. This is done to eliminate any binding of two square cut edges fighting to get into the corner. When cutting your piece, simply angle the knife away from the scribe line, but do not allow the blade to deviate from it while cutting. Finish outside edges using corner guard molding. However, you'll want to use either solid color, plastic, or wood corner molding to hide the edges. Depending on what kind of corner guard you choose will determine how it's installed. Another situation you'll encounter is the stove bar mark. This is caused during manufacturing of the product and is in each roll of bulletin board. When drying the bulletin board material, it's suspended in large loops in drying rooms. The top loop, known as the pole mark, is cut off and recycled. The bottom of each loop is called a stove bar mark and will appear approximately in the center of each roll. No need for concern, it doesn't in any way hinder the performance or life of the product. You just need to perform one extra step when installing it. The stove bar mark can be identified by a hump in your material. In order to get the piece to adhere to the wall securely, you'll need to apply adhesive to not only the wall, but also to the section of the material affected by the stove bar. Spread adhesive to the jute backing at the stove bar mark using the flat edge of the trowel or a large putty knife. This will create a much stronger bond between the material and the wall. Once both surfaces have had adhesive applied, position the piece in place and thoroughly roll out the stove bar. Apply a great deal of pressure to the roller to be sure the adhesive is solidly compressed between the two surfaces, giving proper transfer of adhesive. There are several options for creating seams between each piece of bulletin board. The decision on what type of seam you choose needs to be made prior to your installation. We have demonstrated the butt seam throughout this video. Other options include the routed seam, which is created by cutting a groove in the seam using a hand router or groover. Another option is the painted gap seam. Prior to your installation, you need to apply the color that will show through the gap. The width of the gap can be set by using a piece of scrap material or even specially designed spacers. Creating a seam using wood trim in between each piece of bulletin board is another attractive option. T-molding, J-trim, or H-bar can also be inserted between each piece. But again, you must preset the space using a piece of whatever molding you decide as a spacer between each piece of material. These are a few of the more commonly used seam treatments for installing the bulletin board tackable wall surface. The installation methods we have demonstrated here are full floor-to-ceiling coverage. However, if you have an area you'd like to apply the bulletin board to, but not from floor to ceiling, you could perform a horizontal application, also referred to as a railroad installation. To perform this method, simply follow all the procedures for surface and material preparation described earlier. Once you've covered each of these steps and you're ready for installation, nail or screw a decorative molding to the wall at the bottom of the desired height. The molding should be shaped so that the 1/4 inch bulletin board is cupped and supported during installation. Remember, vigorous rolling is critical to ensure proper adhesive transfer. When installation is complete, similar moldings can be applied to the top and sides to decoratively frame the bulletin board. For minor repairs such as gouges, dents, or cuts, there is a method called hoofer-doofer, We won't go into where the name comes from, but if you need a repair, this is the trick. First, you need a scrap of the material used so that the color matches. Using your utility knife, scrape along the surface, creating fine particles. Once you've scraped up enough for your repair, you'll need some white Elmer's glue and mix it together with your scraping, mixed well enough to form a putty-like consistency. Take your finger and press the mix into the dent or gouge and smooth it out. You can also use a putty knife for smoothing. Once it's in place, use a damp rag to wipe off any excess and clean around the area. Good as new. There are other applications that have created illusions using various colors of bulletin board and special installation techniques. Who knows? Once you've gotten the hang of it, you may create a few new ones of your own. Be sure to let us know if you do. Maybe you'll be in our next installation video. In closing, there are just a few points to remember. A clean work area and an even cleaner application surface is critical. Let the adhesive set, but don't let it dry. Installing too wet is better than too dry. When using the wall roller, put your weight into it. Don't just go through the motions, make it stick. Poor adhesive transfer is one of the most common problems and one of the most difficult to fix, so do it right the first time. Only use soap and water when cleaning and caring for bulletin board, and it will give you years of satisfying performance. If you have any questions regarding the condition of your material, please contact the place of purchase before proceeding with the installation.